Continuing, number 7. Which of the following represents the solution set of the following equation? And so here, again, I'm just going to isolate x. I'm going to add 12 to both sides, which results in 1/2 x squared equals 25. Negative 25, that is. Then I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, which gets me x squared equals 50. Oh, again, negative 50, that is. And then I'm going to square root both sides. Now, square root of negative 50. Negative 50 is going to break down to negative 1 times 25 times 2. Square root of negative 1 is I. Square root of 25 is 5. So we have a final answer of positive or negative 5i times the square root of 2, which is number 3. All right, so here we go with the powers of I. So let me do a little sidebar here and show you what I showed you on the front page. We know I to be square root of negative 1. So if I multiply this by I, then if I do square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1, that gets me negative 1. I cubed, just take this previous answer, multiply it by I again, that gets me negative I. And then take this previous answer, multiply it by another I. I times I would give me I squared, but I squared is negative 1, and negative 1 times negative here times another negative 1 gets me positive 1. So just in this short list, I raised to an even power is either going to give you negative 1 or 1. If the power is divisible by 4, it's going to give you 1. If the power is only divisible by 2, it's going to give you a negative 1. And again, when I do divisible by 4, that means divisible by 2 twice. I raised to an odd power. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm going to hop over here and do all of the even powers first. So I squared we know to be negative 1. As I proceed through my list here, the next even one I see is letter C, I to the 4th, which from our list we know is positive 1. But again, I'll reiterate, if it's divisible by 2 twice, then it's going to be positive 1. And 4 is divisible by 2 twice. Letter D is odd, E is odd. Letter F is even. 30 divided by 2 is 15, but can you divide 15 by 2 again? No. So if you can only divide it by 2 once, your answer is negative 1. 25, G is odd exponent, H is even. So let's hop over here to H. 36 divided by 2 is 18, and 18 can be divided by 2 again. So those are the ones that result in a positive 1. I is odd, J is odd, K is even. 80 divided by 2 is even, or it gives you 40, and then I can divide 40 by 2 again. So we said if it's divisible by 2 twice, you're going to get a positive 1. And the last one there, 70 divided by 2 is 35. 35 is not divisible by 2 again, so that's going to be the negative 1. All right, now the odd powers. I think the easiest way to approach those is to break it down. Break this down to I squared times I, because that is equivalent to I cubed. Well, I squared is negative 1. Negative 1 times I is negative I. So odd powers are either going to result in I or negative I. And it's easiest to break it down to I to an even power times I to the 1st. And you'll see what I mean as I go here. So letter E, I to the 41st. So I'm going to drop that exponent down by 1. And we're going to change this to I to the 40th times I. Well, now that we've got an even power here, we can determine, is this negative 1 or positive 1? Divided by 2 is 20, and it can be divided by 2 again, so that's going to be positive 1, and 1 times I is just I. I to the 25th. I'm going to break that down to I to the 24th times I. So 24 divided by 2 is 12, and can be divided by 2 again, so that's going to be a positive 1 times I, which is 1I. I to the 51st would be I to the 50th times I. 50 can only be divided by 2 once, so that's going to be a negative 1. So that results in a negative I. I to the 45th is going to be changed to I to the 44th times I. 44 divided by 2 is 22, and that can be divided by 2 again, so that's going to be a positive 1. So that is positive 1I. And that's it for that one. Number 9, which of the following is equivalent to I to the 7th times I to the 8th times I to the 9th times I to the 10th? So I'm going to work through this really quickly. I to the 6th times I to the 6th. 6 is only divisible by 2 once, so that's going to be negative I. I to the 8th, that's divisible by 2 twice, so that's just 1. I to the 9th is going to be I to the 8th times I. And I to the 8th I just said was 1 over here, so that's 1 times I, which is I. And then I to the 10th, well, 10 can be only to be divided by 2 once, so that's going to be a negative I. So this negative I and positive I cancel each other out. So it looks like I have 1 minus I, which is number 3. Okay, so I'm going to skip number 10 just for the sake of time. That works exactly the same way as number 9. Number 11 is just a double distributing problem, keeping in mind that I squared is negative 1. So if I distribute my 6, here we go. Distributing my 6 results in 24 minus 18I. Then distributing my 2 gets me plus 8I minus 6I squared. Well, we know I squared to be negative 1, so this really is plus 6 here at the end. And 24 plus 6 is 30. And then negative 18I plus 8I would be negative 10I for a final answer of number 4.